Up until now, we've been primarily talking about the product market. But we want to get into the resource market a little bit. And when we talk about the resource market, our primary focus is on labor. If for no other reason, people are involved with labor, and we pay attention to what happens to people. When we look at the labor market, there's a couple of things you need to keep in mind. It works just like any other market. So, in the sense of where equilibrium is set, in the sense that there is a demand and a supply and a price and a quantity, that all works exactly the same. However, when we look at the labor market, the roles are reversing in the market. So instead of the firm being the supplier, now the firm is the demander. They are the people who need labor if they want to produce some sort of product. The household becomes the supplier instead of the demander because it's the household that supplies labor to the labor market. You, in essence, are selling yourself, so you are providing the supply into the market. We also want to keep in mind that in a market we have a price. In the labor market, using the term price for labor has sort of a negative connotation. Instead, what we do is we call the price the wage. This helps us to identify that we are indeed talking about a labor market rather than some other market when we see that wage is on the vertical axis. Now, because we're dealing with this concept of wage and we're dealing with this labor instead of some other product, we go back to the idea of demand and supply. We go back to the concept of the law of demand and the law of supply, and we see that everything pretty much holds the same as it did in any other market. In this case, however, we replace the word price with the word wage. So as the wage goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. You're more willing to enter a market, regardless of the kind of job, if the wage is higher. So just ask yourself, would you take a job as say someone who picks up garbage at $10 an hour? Maybe you would and maybe you wouldn't, but you're much more likely to enter that labor market to provide your services if the wage was, say, $100 an hour. That's an indication that as the wage goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. On the demand side, if the wage goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. Firms will reallocate the way they produce things away from the more expensive input. So if wages for garbage collectors are $100 an hour, firms are going to try to find new ways of collecting garbage that involve a lot less labor because they can't afford to hire labor at $100 an hour. Either that or they'll just pass the price of the final product on to the consumer. And that brings us to another interesting point about labor. When we talk about the demand for labor, the demand comes from one of two primary sources. One is something we refer to as derived demand. The reason people want you to work for them is because the product you're making is more valuable and they can make money selling it. There's a greater demand for a product. If there's a greater demand for a product, there'll be a greater demand for you as the laborer. Think about it maybe in reverse. If we look at markets where labor demand is going down, say in the market for newspaper and journalists, there's a decrease in demand for those people because there's a decrease in the demand for the product that they produce. Or ask yourself, when was the last time you hired a blacksmith? Maybe never, because you don't ride a horse anymore. The demand for horses has gone down, and consequently the demand for people who service the horses has gone down as well. Or a cobbler. How many times have you taken your shoes to get repaired? Probably never. So you just throw your shoes away and you go get a new pair. And so people who fix shoes aren't in demand anymore. The second reason there is demand for labor, or the demand for labor could change, is because of productivity. The more productive you are, the higher the demand for your services. So people with higher levels of education, people with higher levels of technological experience, or just general work experience, find a greater demand for their services because they are able to provide something more valuable to the firm. And the more value you can provide to the firm, the greater the demand for your services. On the supply side of the labor market, we look at one primary thing about supply. We notice that the greater number of people there are in a market, the more supply there is, and consequently the lower the wages will be. So if you have low-skilled labor, there tends to be a lot of people in that market. And as you allow, say, immigrants into the country, that increases the supply of low-skilled labor and puts downward pressure on the wage. And so we look at generally the amount of people in a particular labor market. As that increases or decreases, that changes the supply. The supply, remember, is the entire curve. If you're changing the wage, you're just changing the quantity supplied. The quantity supplied of labor is in large part determined by something we refer to as the labor-leisure debate. As you make more money, the additional happiness that you receive from that money tends to go down, and you would like to trade off labor for leisure. However, as the wage goes up, the opportunity cost for not working also goes up. So at higher wages, people are more inclined to sacrifice leisure, sacrifice playtime, if you will, in order to work more. And that gives us the upward slope of the labor supply curve.